So it's been a while since we updated you on the Staff i3. This is our i3 Rex. It's a 2015 for those of you who don't know. Back when we first got it, we had some issues. So I'll talk about them in a little while. But first up, let's have a little think about the i3. So most people think of the i3 as a city car, certainly marketed that way. It's got the good high driving position. It's got great all-round visibility. It's small. It doesn't have great range, at least not the 2015, 2016. The 22 kilowatt hour version, not great range. So what am I doing out here in the countryside? Well, the thing that I really love about this car is that at its heart, it's still a BMW. So it still has really good handling, even on its skinny little tires. It's rear-wheel drive. Out here, out in the sticks on twisty roads, it is enormous fun. And that is one of my favorite things about it. The charging network around here isn't great. So we have ended up using the Rex a fair amount, and today, for this trip, to bring you out somewhere which is pretty and, you know, lots of nice scenery and stuff like that, yeah, gotta be on the Rex, because there aren't any rapid chargers out here. I'm coming up to a little town called Hoodsport. There's a level 2 charger there, so I can top up while I eat my lunch before I come home. But as it stands, not much in the way of DC rapid charging out here. One of the things to think about is battery degradation. So ours is 3 years old, coming up on 4, and it has the 22 kilowatt hour battery, as I said, which has about 18 kilowatt hours usable when it's new. Ours is not new. It has 41,000 miles on the clock. And at this point, using the onboard charging system monitor, you can sort of sneak your way through the menus a little bit and you can find out the actual capacity of the battery. And it's not entirely accurate. You need to sort of take its readings with a bit of a pinch of salt. But at the end of the day, it gives you a rough idea about where you are at with the state of the battery. And in our case, we are at about 10% degradation, which is interesting because you wouldn't really expect it to have that much degradation. It does have thermal management. But one of the things that sticks in my mind is that the US version, unlike the European version, you are not meant to enable hold state of charge at, I think it's set at 6.5%. So that means that when you're driving long distances and the charging network as it is around here isn't really up to snuff, you spend a lot of time, if you use the Rex, with the battery at a fairly low state of charge, so around 6-7%. And the Rex, the range extender, can't actually keep up with the amount of energy used by the car in challenging situations for the car. So, and I say challenging, that's a pretty generous term because, you know, things like driving at freeway speeds, that's not going to do. You can't do that. Well, you can, but it will slowly eat away your charge. You can't have the heater on at the same time as doing freeway speeds. That is not a good combination. I mean, you can, but if you want to do 60 or 70 miles an hour, then you are really a bit stuffed, at least if you try and do any long distance. We tend to find that around 50-55 is about the limit. If we are on the freeway and we have a long way to go and we're using the range extender. The end point of this long ramble is that the i3 actually ends up, with the range extender, actually ends up putting its battery under quite a lot of stress at a low state of charge for long periods of time in the US spec. In the European spec, you can set your state of charge and you can dink with it and you can turn it on whenever you want. Now ours has been coded so that you can do that, but I do wonder if the previous owner didn't, and that is partially responsible for 10% battery loss at only 41,000 miles, which isn't great. BMW do have a good battery warranty, so we will be keeping an eye on that, and if we get worse battery degradation, then we will be going there. But it does mean that our i3 has a range that is less than ideal. So in the summer, we can get about 65 to 70 miles out of it. In the winter, we only get around 50-ish miles if you have the heating on. That's particularly a problem for us because we only have one EV charger at home. Well, we have 2 chargers, but we only have one decent level 2 charger. So the RAV has a dedicated 240 volt line, which allows it to draw 30 amps at 220 volts. So that can charge in about 5 hours from empty to full. This gets plugged into a 110 volt outlet. So that's 110 volts, and I think they're limited to 16 amps, but I don't think it charges at 16 amps. And it's not in the greatest shape. So that means that you gain about 4.5 miles every hour, maybe. My other job requires me to work 12-hour shifts. The time in between is about 10 hours, including my travel time, so 10 hours. And it's about a 50-mile round trip, and there is no charging at work. As you can imagine, in winter, I'm pretty much dependent on the Rex. I can get to work and I can get most of the way home. In the spring, it snowed. I had a journey home where about 2/3 of it was done on the Rex because the weather was abysmal. It was freezing cold. The i3 does not have a heated windscreen, so the heater had to be on. Even when I was warm enough, I still needed the heating on to keep the screen from misting up. Even driving home at around 35, 40 miles an hour, which is pretty much was my limit given the road conditions. Yeah, it wasn't the greatest journey in the world, and it was mainly done on the Rex. I'm still very, very fond of the i3's interior. Even after this period of time, you know, the car hasn't been perfect in many regards, but the i3 has a really nice interior. Given that it is designed to be a really eco-friendly interior and there's a lot of weight saving, so no electric seats and things like that. And one of the things I love about this car is the fact that it has this really eco-friendly ethos to its design. It's not just a battery electric vehicle. You know, a lot of the stuff is recycled or natural fibers. So the i3's interior has stood up very well to 41,000 miles of use. There are no rattles, there are no squeaks, everything fits really well. There's that subtle difference between this and a lot of the other cars I've driven where the plastic doesn't feel, I mean, it's clearly plastic, but it feels good and solid. It doesn't feel like you're just, you know, it's bendy or it sounds hollow. Everything sounds pretty solid. Well, there are two things that let it down. One is the plastic dashboard, which is nasty. I mean, it's not nasty, but it really lets down the rest of the car. Now, I know this is the base trim, and if we had managed to eke out the money for a nicer trim level, then we could have had eucalyptus. But this, I mean, it looks fine, but it doesn't feel great. The other thing is the steering wheel. Now, I know, you know, white car interiors and white steering wheels are partly about showing off your privilege that you can afford a car that's nice enough that it has a white interior and you can afford to keep it clean. So if we wipe this off, we can wipe it off with like a hand wipe and it looks okay for a little bit, like leather cleaner stuff. But it's worn just around this ridge, and what happens is it just picks up dirt instantly. So it doesn't really matter if you clean it. The next day, it looks terrible. And that is a shame. It lets down the rest of the interior. It makes the rest of the car look less clean, which is just a bit sad. So the steering wheel lets the car down a little bit. But what really lets the car down for me is the in-car entertainment system. See, I understand as a luxury automaker, you want your operating system on your car to feel like a thing that is part of the car. You don't want it to feel like you're using your phone in your car. Every vehicle that I've been in with its own operating system that has not used Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, they just aren't as good at integrating with your phone. And that's very frustrating because, yeah, I can set music playing on my phone and I can skip track. That's adequate. I can make calls. Yeah, that's adequate. I can't set navigation on my phone, and I do not like the navigation system on this car. I've tried the navigation system, the GPS, on a variety of BMW vehicles, and it is not as good as Google Maps. It's just not as good. You know, it's clunky anyway, trying to get navigation directions in using the spell it one letter at a time method, no keyboard. That's not great. It's also not that accurate, so I still find going through junctions, it'll get confused and think that you've come off a motorway and that you've taken the turn off the motorway, and here you are with suddenly this slew of random directions, and then it'll take a while to work out that you're not there. And that can be fine. It can, you just, if you know where you're going more or less. But if you're in a city and you've got a motorway or multiple roads running close to each other, then it will very frequently get confused and the directions won't make any sense. And that can be quite stressful if it's very busy and you don't know where you're going. So you're actually using the GPS rather than using it as a sort of aide-memoire for, oh, I know roughly where it is, but I don't know exactly. I just need you to get me within, a quarter of a mile and I'll be able to find my way. So this goes out to all automakers as far as I'm concerned. If you are going to do your own navigation system and your own in-car entertainment system, it must be at least as good and at least as integrated with Android and Apple's iOS, because otherwise it's just irritating. It's irritating that I can't use my phone's navigation system. It's more irritating because for some reason it will randomly choose days when you can hear the navigation and other times it will just play silence at you. So the other thing which I did want to mention is the Sirius audio that came with it. So it has satellite radio. We do not have that anymore. We get incessant letters from them saying, please rejoin us. But the thing is, it sounded awful. And the rest of the sound system, because we have the bass sound system, we don't have the Harman Kardon sound system. The rest of it is perfectly adequate. It's a car. I don't expect it to sound like I'm sat in the auditorium of the Albert Hall. It's fine if it's adequate. But the Sirius stuff, it sounded like it was in a swimming pool. It was dreadful. It actually made me feel nauseous sometimes. So we don't have that. We just have the plain sound system in the car, and we use the phone to play music because there's no CD player because CD players are so 1990. But while I love the i3, the big elephant in the room, and the one which we touched on when we first got the car, is reliability. And ours has not been the most reliable beast. In fact, a little tiny piece of the car broke today coming out here. The little bit that holds the string on that lifts up the parcel shelf. It just broke. So that was nice. So this is about 10 months worth of i3 ownership. So we've had faulty seatbelt sensors, we've had a faulty Rex, we've had a faulty heater, we've had a faulty DC rapid charger. That's not good. It's got 40,000 miles on the clock and it's spent more time in the garage than most of our other cars ever have. Our 20-year-old Volvo 340 spent less time in the garage than this i3 has. It's not good, which makes it hard to recommend it. And I really would love to recommend the i3 without hesitation. I mean, the range isn't great, but the newer ones, they're addressing that. It's still not really worth the new price, but used, they are a steal. The challenge is, if you want an i3, you're going to have one with a warranty, because this is going to be one expensive beast when the warranty runs out. And that's a real shame, because I love it. I love the rear-wheel drive. I love coming out to places like this, so we'll probably keep it. I think they're a good deal second-hand, and if BMW actually bring the battery upgrade option that they've had in Europe over to the US, then putting what will be coming, the 42 kilowatt hour battery in this, that will be a transformative thing for this car. It will be amazing, as long as it can keep working. So I recorded that last video with my slightly snarky remark about keeping the car working, which possibly cursed me. So I think it was less than a week later, maybe a week and a bit later, the car started having problems unlocking. The lock mechanism on the charger stopped working, or on the car that locks the charger cable to the car. It stopped working. It was intermittent, and actually I forgot, hold my hands up, I forgot there's a manual release, which I should have checked. So I had a very irritating morning where the car wouldn't unlock for 20 minutes, which made me late for work. Partly obviously my own fault because I didn't check that the check for the manual release. It's led me to this kind of thought process, which is that of the 10 months we've had the car, it spent nearly a month at BMW being repaired. And that's really not great for a 3-year-old car. Not great. There's this point. I've had a succession of slightly ratty classic cars. Quite ratty, actually, some of them. Usually from the 1970s, usually British. Vauxhall Viva, for example. That one had so many problems that, you know, I nicknamed it Brick because I wanted it to be solid, but actually it was more of a descriptive name because it spent a lot of its time sat still at the side of the road with steam coming out of it, or with electrical problems, or having burnt through the entire contents of the oil in the sump. So I'm used to cars that are flaky, but I don't expect that out of a new luxury vehicle, or a nearly new luxury vehicle. And there's this point that you sometimes reach with a car where you've lost confidence in it. And as I have another one of these now, and another trip to BMW, and another set of new parts for it, I think we might have hit that point where I've lost confidence. I don't know what we'll do. I don't know whether we'll replace it. I don't know whether we'll sell it, but yeah, it's not looking good.